a WikiVidi documentaries production. Don't forget to like and subscribe. Enjoy. Mauritius. Mauritius, officially the Republic of Mauritius, is an island nation in the Indian Ocean about 2,000 kilometers off the southeast coast of the African continent. The country includes the islands of Mauritius and Rodrigues, east of Mauritius, and the outer islands. The islands of Mauritius and Rodrigues form part of the Mascarene Islands, along with nearby Réunion, a French overseas department. The area of the country is. The capital and largest city is Port Louis. It is a member of the African Union, formerly a Dutch colony and a French colony. Mauritius became a British colonial possession in 1810 and remained so until 1968, the year in which it attained independence. The British Crown colony of Mauritius once included the current territories of Mauritius, Rodrigues, the outer islands of Agaléga, St. Brandon, Chagos Archipelago, and Seychelles. The Mauritian territories gradually devolved with the creation of a separate colony of Seychelles in 1903 and the excision of the Chagos Archipelago in 1965. The sovereignty over the Chagos Archipelago is disputed between Mauritius and the United Kingdom. The UK excised the archipelago from Mauritian territory in 1965, 3 years prior to Mauritian independence. The UK gradually depopulating the archipelago's indigenous population and leased its biggest island, Diego Garcia, to the United States. Access to the archipelago is prohibited to casual tourists, the media, and its former inhabitants. Mauritius also claims sovereignty over Tromelin Island from France. The people of Mauritius are multi-ethnic, multi-religious, multicultural and multilingual. The island's government is closely modelled on the Westminster parliamentary system, and Mauritius is highly ranked for democracy and for economic and political freedom. The Human Development Index of Mauritius is the highest in Africa. Along with the other Mascarene Islands, Mauritius is known for its varied flora and fauna, with many species endemic to the island. The island is widely known as the only known home of the dodo, which, along with several other avian species, was made extinct by human activities relatively shortly after the island's settlement. Mauritius is the only country in Africa where Hinduism is the largest religion. The administration uses English as its main language. Geography. The total land area of the country is. It is the 169th largest nation in the world by size. The Republic of Mauritius is constituted of the main island of Mauritius and several outlying islands. The second largest island is Rodrigues, with an area of and situated to the east of Mauritius. The twin islands of Agaléga, with a total land area of are situated some north of Mauritius. St. Brandon is an archipelago comprising a number of sand banks, shoals, and islets. It is situated some northeast of Mauritius and is mostly used as a fishing base by the Raphael Fishing Company Limited. The nation's exclusive economic zone covers about of the Indian Ocean, including approximately jointly managed with the Seychelles. Mauritius Island. Mauritius is off the southeast coast of Africa, between latitudes 19 degrees and 58.8 minutes and 20 degrees and 31.7 minutes south and longitudes 57 degrees and 18.0 minutes and 57 degrees and 46.5 minutes east. It is long and wide. Its land area is. The island is surrounded by more than of white sandy beaches, and the lagoons are protected from the open sea by the world's third largest coral reef, which surrounds the island. Just off the Mauritian coast lie some 49 uninhabited islands and islets, several used as natural reserves for endangered species. The island of Mauritius is relatively young geologically, having been created by volcanic activity some 8 million years ago. Together with St. Brandon, Réunion, and Rodrigues, the island is part of the Mascarene Islands. These islands have emerged as a result of gigantic underwater volcanic eruptions that happened thousands of kilometers to the east of the continental block made up of Africa and Madagascar. They are no longer volcanically active, and the hotspot now rests under Réunion Island. Mauritius is encircled by a broken ring of mountain ranges, varying in height from above sea level. The land rises from coastal plains to a central plateau where it reaches a height of. The highest peak is in the southwest. Piton de la Petite Rivière Noire at 828 meters. streams and rivers speckle the island, many formed in the cracks created by lava flows. Etymology. The first historical evidence of the existence of an island now known as Mauritius is on a map produced by the Italian cartographer Alberto Contino in 1502. From this, it appears that Mauritius was first named Dinarobi around 975 by Arab sailors, the first people to visit the island. In 1507, Portuguese sailors visited the uninhabited island. The island appears with a Portuguese name on early Portuguese maps, probably from the name of a ship in the 1507 expedition. Another Portuguese sailor, Dom Pedro Mascareneus, gave the name Mascarenes to the archipelago. In 1598, a Dutch squadron under Admiral Wybrand van Wijk landed at Grand Port and named the island Mauritius, in honor of Prince Maurice van Nassau, stateholder of the Dutch Republic. Later the island became a French colony and was renamed Isle de France. On 3 December 1810, the French surrendered the island to Great Britain during the Napoleonic Wars. Under British rule, the island's name reverted to Mauritius. Mauritius is also commonly known as Maurice and Île Maurice in French, Maurice in Mauritian Creole. History. The island of Mauritius was uninhabited before its first recorded visit during the Middle Ages by Arab sailors, who named it Dinarobi. However, the island might have been visited well before by sailors of ancient times. Wax tablets were found on the shores of Mauritius by the Dutch, but since the tablets were not preserved, it cannot be said whether they were of Greek, Phoenician or Arab origin. In 1507, Portuguese sailors came to the uninhabited island and established a visiting base. Diogo Fernandes Pereira, a Portuguese navigator, was the first European known to land in Mauritius. He named the island Ilha do Sin. The Portuguese did not stay long as they were not interested in these islands. Dutch Mauritius, 1638-1710. In 1598 a Dutch squadron under Admiral Wybrand van Wijk landed at Grand Port and named the island Mauritius, after Prince Maurice van Nassau of the Dutch Republic, the ruler of his country. The Dutch established a small colony on the island in 1638, from which they exploited ebony trees and introduced sugar cane, domestic animals and deer. It was from here that Dutch navigator Abel Tasman set out to discover the western part of Australia. The first Dutch settlement lasted 20 years. Several attempts were subsequently made, but the settlements never developed enough to produce dividends, causing the Dutch to abandon Mauritius in 1710. French Mauritius, 1715-1810. France, which already controlled neighboring Île Bourbon, took control of Mauritius in 1715 and renamed it Isle de France. In 1723, the Code Noir was established to categorize one group of human beings as goods, in order for the owner of these goods to be able to obtain insurance money and compensation in case of loss of his goods. The 1735 arrival of French Governor Bertrand François Maé de la Bourdonnais coincided with development of a prosperous economy based on sugar production. Maé de la Bourdonnais established Port Louis as a naval base and a shipbuilding center. Under his governorship, numerous buildings were erected, a number of which are still standing. These include part of Government House, the Château de Montplaisir, and the Line Barracks, the headquarters of the police force. The island was under the administration of the French East India Company, which maintained its presence until 1767. From 1767 to 1810, except for a brief period during the French Revolution when the inhabitants set up a government virtually independent of France, the island was controlled by officials appointed by the French government. Jacques-Henri Bernardin de Saint-Pierre lived on the island from 1768 to 1771, then went back to France, where he wrote Paulette Virginie, a love story, which made the Isle de France famous wherever the French language was spoken. Two famous French governors were the Vicomte de Sulac and Antoine Bruni d'Entrecasteaux. Charles Mathieu Isidore de Caen was a successful general in the French Revolutionary Wars and, in some ways, a rival of Napoleon I. He ruled as governor of Isle de France and Réunion from 1803 to 1810. British naval cartographer and explorer Matthew Flinders was arrested and detained by General de Caen on the island, in contravention of an order from Napoleon. During the Napoleonic Wars, Mauritius became a base from which French corsairs organized successful raids on British commercial ships. The raids continued until 1810, when a Royal Navy expedition led by Commodore Josias Rowley, RN, an Anglo-Irish aristocrat, was sent to capture the island. Despite winning the Battle of Grand Port, the only French naval victory over the British during these wars, the French could not prevent the British from landing at Cap Malheur 3 months later. They formally surrendered the island on the 5th day of the invasion, the 3rd of December 1810, on terms allowing settlers to keep their land and property and to use the French language and law of France in criminal and civil matters. Under British rule, the island's name reverted to Mauritius. British Mauritius, 1810-1968. The British administration, which began with Sir Robert Farquhar as governor, led to rapid social and economic changes. However, it was tainted by the Ratsit episode. Ratsit, nephew of King Radamer of Madagascar, was brought to Mauritius as a political prisoner. He managed to escape from prison and plotted a rebellion that would free the island's slaves. He was betrayed by an associate and was caught by the British forces, summarily judged, and condemned to death. He was beheaded at Plaine Verte on the 15th of April 1822, and his head was displayed as a deterrent against future uprisings among the slaves. In 1832, Adrien d'Epinay launched the first Mauritian newspaper, which was not controlled by the government. In the same year, there was a move by the Procureur General to abolish slavery without compensation to the slave owners. This gave rise to discontent, and, to check an eventual rebellion, the government ordered all the inhabitants to surrender their arms. Furthermore, a stone fortress, Fort Adelaide, was built on a hill in the center of Port Louis to quell any uprising. Slavery was abolished in 1835, and the planters ultimately received £2 million in compensation for the loss of their slaves who had been imported from Africa and Madagascar during the French occupation. The abolition of slavery had important impacts on Mauritius society, economy and population. The planters brought a large number of indentured laborers from India to work in the sugarcane fields. Between 1834 and 1921, around 500,000 indentured laborers were present on the island. They worked on sugar estates, factories, in transport, and on construction sites. Additionally, the British brought 8,740 Indian soldiers to the island. Pravasi Ghat, in the bay at Port Louis, and now a UNESCO site, was the first British colony to serve as a major reception centre for slaves and indentured servants for British plantation labour. An important figure of the 19th century was Remy Ollier, a journalist of mixed origin. In 1828, the colour bar was officially abolished in Mauritius, but British governors gave little power to coloured persons, and appointed only whites as leading officials. Remy Ollier petitioned to Queen Victoria to allow coloureds in the Council of Government, and this became possible a few years later. He also made Port Louis become a municipality so that the citizens could administer the town through their own elected representatives. A street has been named after him in Port Louis, and his bust was erected in the Jardin de la Compagnie in 1906. In 1885 a new constitution was introduced to Mauritius. It created elected positions on the governing council, but the franchise was restricted mainly to the French and Creole classes. The laborers brought from India were not always fairly treated, and a German, Adolf von Plewitz, made himself the unofficial protector of these immigrants. He mixed with many of the laborers, and in 1871 helped them to write a petition which was sent to Governor Gordon. A commission was appointed to look into the complaints made by the Indian immigrants, and in 1872 two lawyers, appointed by the British Crown, were sent from England to make an inquiry. This Royal Commission recommended several measures that would affect the lives of Indian labourers during the next 50 years. In November 1901, Mahatma Gandhi visited Mauritius, on his way from South Africa to India. He stayed on the island for 2 weeks, and urged the Indo-Mauritian community to take an interest in education and to play a more active role in politics. Back in India, he sent over a young lawyer, Manilal Doctor, to improve the plight of the Indo-Mauritians. During the same year, faster links were established with the island of Rodrigues thanks to the wireless. In 1903, motorcars were introduced in Mauritius, and in 1910 the first taxis, operated by Joseph Mervyn, came into service. The electrification of Port Louis took place in 1909, and in the same decade the Mauritius Hydroelectric Company was authorized to provide power to the towns of Upper Plains Wilhelms. The 1910s were a period of political agitation. The rising middle class began to challenge the political power of the sugarcane landowners. Eugène Leron, mayor of Port Louis, was the leader of this new group. His party, Action Libérale, demanded that more people should be allowed to vote in the elections. Action Libérale was opposed by the Parti de l'Ordre, led by Henri Leclésio, the most influential of the sugar magnates. In 1911 there were riots in Port Louis due to a false rumor that Dr. Eugène Leron had been murdered by the oligarchs in Capipe. Shops and offices were damaged in the capital, and one person was killed. In the same year, 1911, the first public cinema shows took place in Capipe, and, in the same town, a stone building was erected to house the Royal College. In 1912, a wider telephone network came into service, and it was used by the government, business firms, and a few private households. World War I broke out in August 1914. Many Mauritians volunteered to fight in Europe against the Germans and in Mesopotamia against the Turks. But the war affected Mauritius much less than the wars of the 18th century. On the contrary, the 1914-18 war was a period of great prosperity, because of a boom in sugar prices. In 1919 the Mauritius Sugar Syndicate came into being, and it included 70% of all sugar producers. The 1920s saw the rise of a retrocessionism movement which favored the retrocession of Mauritius to France. The movement rapidly collapsed, because none of the candidates who wanted Mauritius to be given back to France was elected in the 1921 elections. Due to the post-war recession, there was a sharp drop in sugar prices, many sugar estates closed down, and it marked the end of an era for the sugar magnates who had not only controlled the economy, but also the political life of the country. Raoul Rivet, the editor of Le Mauricien newspaper, campaigned for a revision of the constitution that would give the emerging middle class a greater role in the running of the country. The principles of Arya Samaj began to infiltrate the Hindu community, who clamored for more social justice. The 1930s saw the birth of the Labour Party, launched by Dr. Maurice Cure. Emmanuel Anquetil rallied the urban workers while Pandit Sahadio concentrated on the rural working class. Labour Day was celebrated for the first time in 1938. More than 30,000 workers sacrificed a day's wage and came from all over the island to attend a giant meeting at the Champ de Mars. At the outbreak of World War II in 1939, many Mauritians volunteered to serve under the British flag in Africa and the Near East, fighting against the German and Italian armies. Some went to England to become pilots and ground staff in the Royal Air Force. Mauritius was never really threatened, but several British ships were sunk outside Port Louis by German submarines in 1943. During World War II, conditions were hard in the country. The prices of commodities doubled, but the salaries of workers increased only by 10 to 20%. There was civil unrest, and the colonial government crushed all trade union activities. However, the laborers of Bellevue Harold Sugar Estate went on strike on the 27th of September 1943. Police officers eventually fired on the crowd and killed 3 laborers including a boy of 10 and a pregnant woman, Angelique Coupon. The first general elections were held on the 9th of August 1948 and were won by the Labour Party. This party, led by Guy Rosimont, bettered its position in 1953 and, on the strength of the election results, demanded universal suffrage. Constitutional conferences were held in London in 1955 and 1957, and the ministerial system was introduced. Voting took place for the first time on the basis of universal adult suffrage on the 9th of March 1959. The general election was again won by the Labour Party, led this time by Circe Woosagaram-Dulam. A constitutional review conference was held in London in 1961, and a programme of further constitutional advance was established. The 1963 election was won by the Labour Party and its allies. The Colonial Office noted that politics of a communal nature was gaining ground in Mauritius and that the choice of candidates and the voting behaviour were governed by ethnic and caste considerations. Around that time, Two eminent British academics, Richard Titmuss and James Mead, published a report of the island's social problems caused by overpopulation and the monoculture of sugar cane. This led to an intense campaign to halt the population explosion, and the decade registered a sharp decline in population growth. Brought to you by WikiVidi Documentaries. Would you like to know more?